All right, this is I think our 37th lesson. I can't remember, but we're continuing our study of the logic and debate for Christians. We should be in the debate section pretty shortly. I believe we should finish the book by the end of the session in May. And we've been looking at implications. We're going to look at Abram, and I may slip and call him Abraham, but that was his name later. God changed his name to Abraham. But due to a famine, and we find Abram or Abraham went to Egypt from Canaan in Genesis 12:10. Now, here's one thing we run into here. We don't find God telling him to go down to Egypt. So again, he went. It's possible he went on his own accord and that God didn't send him down there. We don't know for sure, but we don't have any explicit evidence that he was told to go into Egypt. All right. In Genesis 12:10, and there was a famine in the land. Now, the famine may have been caused by no rain. It might have been caused by a plague of grasshoppers or locusts. It might have been caused by enemy armies coming in. Could have been caused by too much rain. Too much rain at the wrong time can cause your crops you can't harvest them in the field. They'll rot in the fields. So we normally think of a famine as a lack of rain, but that's not necessarily the case, not necessarily the only reason it would cause it. But we just say a famine, that's all we need to know. And Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was sore in the land. Now, if you've been through my flood materials, you see that I believe there was a reason at the approximate time of Abraham, that there would have been a famine, a lack of rain. And I lay it out in that material. Okay. Right. So now then, we go down and we run here. The text does not explicitly say that either Sarai, and I may call her Sarah, but that was her name later, and Lot, his nephew, went to Egypt. So we don't have an explicit statement that they went to Egypt. Explicitly say they went to Egypt. Came to pass when he was come near to Egypt, however, that he said to Sarai's wife, so she was with him when he came near to Egypt. I'm assuming, and I think it's a pretty rational assumption to make, and we're using induction here, but I think it's pretty rational to say the conclusion that she went with him from Canaan down into Egypt. All right, but it says she was near, when they came near to Egypt, he said to Sarai's wife, obviously she has to be with him for him to speak to her. Behold, now that I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon, and it will come to pass when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, and they will save thee alive. So he had this idea in his mind. And so he says, say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, that my soul may live because of thee. I think the conclusion is pretty inescapable, although it's not actually absolutely certain. But I think the induction, we draw the conclusion that it's almost certain that she went with him into Egypt, and she entered Egypt with Abram. Because before he got there, he's speaking to her. After he gets there, he's speaking to her. And then we see what happens. So I think that I draw the conclusion she was with him. And I think that's a pretty rational conclusion. Now, why not bring this up? Because when you get to deal with atheists, they'll say, well, now this didn't happen. You can show logically that it was likely to have happened. And so that kind of shoots them down in some of their arguments where they try to challenge the integrity of the Bible. So sometimes you might need to do this. And I hope to have a class where we're looking at alleged contradictions in the Bible. I think we'll show how we will use induction to show the probability likelihood that this is what occurred, something that occurred that would show that the Bible is not inconsistent. All right. So we'll be using that. So we're making an application here of induction. Pretty strong induction in my judgment that she went to Egypt with him. We don't have anything said here about Lot, however. So, okay. that she was with Abraham when he came near to Egypt, spoke to her when he came near. The text explicitly says that Sarai was with Abraham when he arrived in Egypt. Conclusion I draw is that she went with him. Came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman that she was fair. So before he got there, he spoke to her, and then when he got into Egypt, I think it's ludicrous to think that she left him and then circled around somewhere and came into Egypt some other way. I mean, that's ludicrous. I think she came with him. I think it's strong implication that she did, inductive, of course, but a strong implication that she was with him when he came into Egypt. And the princes of Pharaoh saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. He dealt well with Abram for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen and he asses and men servants and maid servants and she asses and camels. Jehovah plagued Pharaoh and his house for great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Now, we want to ask ourselves, what did he tell her to say? Let's back up. I want you to see what you say. So, and he says, here's what you shall say. Pray thee, say, thou art my sister. Well, she was his sister. They're half sisters. Okay. They had the same father but different mothers. We can prove that further. Do we know that she said this? We don't have explicit statements that she said this, but I can prove here that somebody said it. Either Abraham said it or Sarah said it. Well, we'll see this in just a few minutes as we develop this. But the text does not explicitly say that Lot went to Egypt, either with Abraham, or separately. Doesn't explicitly say it. Okay? Text explicitly says that Abraham and his wife were brought on the way out of Egypt. So they're escorted out of Egypt, apparently by soldiers, probably. Right? And so in Genesis 12:18, Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What hast thou done unto me? Why didst not tell me that she was thy wife?" I think here, and there's another implication here, somehow he learned that she was his wife. And Abram didn't tell him that. I don't think Sarah told him that. I think God told Pharaoh in a dream about this and as to why the plagues were coming upon him. But that's not stated here, but I think it's pretty strong implication that it happened. And so he says, "Why sayest thou she is my sister?" So I took her to be my wife. So you said she's my sister. So we find Abraham saying this, and Sarah may have said it also. So we see who said it to him. You said it to me. Now, therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go, though, and get out of here. Leave this place, okay? Pharaoh gave men charge concerning him, and they brought him on the way, and his wife and all that he had. Okay? So we know who told him that. It was Abraham. Abraham told him that. Well, it wasn't a lie. But if you tell a half-truth in order to deceive somebody, it amounts to being a lie. So you got to keep that in mind. I explicitly say that Lot came with Abraham and Sarai, Abram and Sarai into Egypt. But the text does explicitly say that Lot went from Canaan to Egypt. It does not explicitly say that. However, the text implicitly says that he went from Canaan to Egypt. I'll show why. It doesn't explicitly say it. The text explicitly says that Abram, Sarai, and Lot went out of Egypt together. In Genesis 13:1, Abram went out of Egypt, he and his wife and all they had, and Lot with him into the south. Right? So now we see here that Abram went out with his wife, and that would be Sarai, and he had Lot with him. Okay? So all of them went out of Egypt. So this tells me something. This tells me something about Lot. We'll see this in just a minute. Not explicitly say that Lot remained with Abram and Sarai after they re-entered Canaan, but we show by implication that he did. Abram passed through the land into the place of Shechem, the Gomorrah, And the Canaanite wasn't then in the land. And Jehovah appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land, and there builded he an altar, and Jehovah appeared unto him. Now, I talk about his sacrifice in my notes and my lessons on the patriarchal law and why he sacrificed here. But I show it in that series of lessons. And he removed from thence and he built an altar unto Jehovah who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence in the mountain of the east of Bethel. And Beth is house, and Hebrew, El is God. And pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar unto Jehovah, called upon the name of Jehovah, and he worshiped God. That's what that means. Abram journeyed on, going on still toward the south. We conclude that Lot probably, for the same reasons that we had last week in our last lesson, that Lot probably from induction for the reasons of safety and fellowship and so forth that we'll set out, remained with Abram and Sarai during this period of time. Probably the same reasons that we gave for him going with them when he came from Haran down to Canaan. Okay. We find Abram and Lot together in Genesis 13:5. Right? And Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Abram and Lot then were separated in Genesis 13:9. And so they did come together at least one more time. Abram and Lot were separated after this time, in Genesis 13:9. Is not the whole land before thee? So their herdsmen were striving with one another. And so Abram says, you decide what you want. I'll give you the choice. You go to the right. And so he says, is not the whole land before thee? You can choose. So he's telling him, you choose where you want to go. I'll take what's left. Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me, so we won't be having strife anymore. So I will take the left hand and I will go to the right. If I'll take the right hand, then I'll go to the left. So you have the choice. You choose what part of the land you want. Right? I look toward the fertile plain of Mount Sodom, not realizing that he was making a bad choice. The bad choice was to put his family in a situation where they would have bad influence. Okay? But that's another lesson in itself. And Jehovah said unto Abram in verse 14, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes and look from the place that thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that thou seest, to thee will I give it, to thy seed forever. So he gave it to him. Okay. Now the term forever is always qualified, and we have to qualify it. Sometimes it means an eternity, sometimes it means as perpetual. It could be perpetual, and that would be as long as it's functioning in that role. And so they had that land as long, but it was conditional, see, that's the point. But the text does not explicitly say that Lot went into Egypt. Let's go back to Lot entering Egypt. It does not explicitly say that he did, but it explicitly reveals that Lot was in Canaan. Genesis 12:5, first of all. Let's look at Lot now. Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his brother's son, all the substance they had gathered, and the souls they had gotten in Haran. They went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. So all three of them, and I would assume that Lot probably had a wife at this time. We don't know when he got her, but he did have a wife, and he had children by her. And so he went into Canaan. Lot did. Lot may be mentioned, but Lot's wife not be mentioned. But he may have already been married when he came out of Haran. We just don't know that. But it reveals that he came with Abram and Sarai out of Egypt. So now he's in Canaan, and then he comes out of Egypt. Genesis 13:1. Abram went out of Egypt, up out of Egypt. He and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. So now Lot is in Canaan, and he comes out of Egypt. There's no way that can happen except in Egypt. So Lot was with Abram in Canaan, Genesis 12:5. Later, Lot came out of Egypt with Abram and Sarai, Genesis 13:1. It's axiomatic. It's a self-evident truth that Lot must have gone into Egypt at some time. Now, if Lot was in Canaan and he came out of Egypt, it's axiomatic that he went from Canaan down to Egypt. So we draw that conclusion. It's an inescapable conclusion. And so we know that happened. We just don't know exactly. We can't say with all certainty when he went down. From induction, we conclude from the same reasons that concluded Abraham and Sarah, and Lot probably traveled together from Haran to Canaan. That's above, in our notes above. In last week's lesson, we covered that. That Lot probably went down from Canaan to Egypt with Abram when the famine came. They probably all went together. That's my conclusion. Again, I'm not dogmatic about it, but I think it's pretty reasonable to draw that conclusion. But I know he went down into Canaan, from Canaan into Egypt, because he was in Canaan and he came out of Egypt later. So he had to have gone down into Egypt. It's downhill from where he was into Egypt. Now then, any questions or comments there? All right. Now, this section, we're going to note some more necessary inferences. I'm going to introduce some more necessary inferences. This is an application of our logic. We may use inductive reasoning for part of them. Implication regarding the miracles performed in the scriptures. For our first example, we're going to note that there were two miracles, almost certainly two miracles performed by Jesus in Mark 8:22 and 25. They came unto Bethsaida, and they bring to him a blind man and beseech him to touch him. He took hold of the blind man by the hand and brought him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands upon him, he asked him, "Seest thou aught?" He looked up and said, "I see men, for I behold them as trees walking." Then again he laid his hands upon his eyes, and he looked steadfastly, restored, and saw things clearly. Now, I know I've read somewhere that some atheists claim, well, Jesus did a half miracle here. He just kind of messed up. And so he had to do it over. I think he performed two miracles. And that each miracle was totally done and fully a miracle and did everything he's supposed to do. I think what we see here, he performed two miracles. The first miracle was in restoring the man's sight. When Jesus healed him, he was able to see men, apparently at a distance. He saw them, they were walking. The men that he saw were walking, but they appeared as trees to him. Now, some would say, well, he's just seeing things fuzzy. I don't think so. I think it makes much more sense if he had been born blind and had felt of trees and had viewed men like trees, felt of trees. So he saw men out there, and in his mind, he had made a vision. In his mind, he had made an image in his mind, a mental image of what a tree looked like. He'd put his hands around it and felt it. And he saw men out there, and they were kind of round looking like a tree. And I think that's what he saw. And they appeared like trees. And so the claim is that he performed was a weak miracle. The atheists make that claim. Had to be reworked and is made by some skeptics. I believe it's false. The second miracle I claim is almost certainly made here was he gave the man the ability to see things. But if he had been born blind, it would make perfectly good sense. What he saw, he wouldn't recognize what it was. He'd never seen things with his eyes. He'd felt of them, put his hand around trees and stuff. So he doesn't know what anything is that he sees. He sees a camel, is what's that? And so what Jesus did for him here was gave him the ability to fill his mind with knowledge of what these things were that he was seeing. That, I believe, was the second miracle. We're going to show it applied in at least in other instances. At least one other instance we'll show conclusively by deductive reason. This is by induction here, my argument is. Man was miraculously given the ability to recognize things that he saw. That's my claim. Now, that's by induction, not by deduction. To give you my argument here, and we'll see it's a sort of if-then statements. If the man had been born blind and he had never seen anything, if that's true, we can't prove that's true. If a man had never seen anything, then he would not recognize men walking at a distance. And his sensory perception was with his hands, his feeling, and he felt things. So he'd use his hands to feel things. He'd get an image in his mind, a mental image of what that thing looked like in his mind. So if he'd never seen anything, he did not recognize men walking a distance, and it required two miracles for him to both see things and recognize the things that what things were that he was seeing. So I believe here, a man who was deaf and mute and never spoken in his life, when Jesus healed him, he was able to understand speech. And if you go to passages, a person was born, if he were born deaf, and he was able to understand speech. Well, now you wouldn't understand speech. You'd have to learn what the words meant. It'd be like a bunch of gibberish to you. But if Jesus gave him miraculous ability to understand the words that we was hearing, what he'd never heard, that would be the second miracle. So I'm saying, if the man had never seen anything and did not recognize men walking at this, then it required two miracles for him to both see things and recognize what the things were. I think this explains the situation that occurred when Jesus healed him. The man had never seen anything and did not recognize men walking at a distance. That's my claim. For him to both see. The first miracle is to give his eyes the ability to see things. The second miracle is giving his mind, his brain, the ability to recognize all the things he was seeing now. Any questions or comments? That's my explanation of the passage, and I believe that is a plausible explanation. So I'm using my inductive argument for this and showing that the atheist has no grounds for saying Jesus performed a weak miracle. This is a plausible explanation, and being plausible, it shows that it's possible that this is the correct explanation, and it gets around the atheist claim or the skeptic's claim that it's a weak miracle. That's my answer to it. Question or comment? All right. For our second example, we know that Jesus healed a man who was born blind. And he passed by and saw a man blind from his birth. So this man is definitely blind from his birth. I don't think it's the same man. And the first miracle was when Jesus healed his blindness. On the ground and made clay of the spittle and anointed his eyes with the clay. And he said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which is by interpretation sent. He went away, therefore, and washed and came seeing. He came back. Now, how did he know how to come back? Well, he might have been led when he was blind by someone to the pool, but he can see now. And so I think that Jesus didn't just quit there. He gave him the ability to understand what he was seeing, recognize things that he saw. He gave him that ability. So that would be a need for a second miracle. Giving the eyes the ability to see, the mind the ability to know what he was seeing. And so that would be two miracles that Jesus performed here. Since he's born blind, he enabled him to know the things that he saw. This was, I believe, the second miracle. Now, again, I'm getting this by induction, by reasoning and saying that this is almost certainly what Jesus did. He didn't have to spend a year or two learning what things were. When he saw a cow, it's a cow, and a camel's a camel, and have to learn all these things. I believe God just gave him that ability to know these things. That would be miraculously given, and God can do that. Since he was born blind, Jesus enabled him to know the things that he saw. This is the second miracle. From the blind man of Bethsaida, we can prove by induction that Jesus, no doubt, performed the same two miracles here, enabling the man to both see and recognize what he saw. Now, we have an instance, and that's by induction. Both of these have been by induction. a strong probability. We're showing you that it's a possibility that this would explain what happened. Our third example is necessary inference. We have a conclusive proof of it in the case of Acts 3, 1 through 8. Now, Peter and John were going up into the temple at the hour of prayer, being the 9th hour. Remember, their time was divided into 12 hours of the day and then watches of the night. So the 12 hours of the day, and some days of the year would be, each hour would be at 60 minutes long. But the hours would change. It would be by a sundial. But let's not get into that. But that would be the 9th hour would be about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay. All right. Now, Peter and John were going up into the temple at the hour of prayer, being the 9th hour. We would call that about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And a certain man who was lame from his mother's womb was carried, whom they laid daily at the door of the temple, which is called Beautiful. As alms to him, they entered in the temple. His friends or relatives or someone was carrying him and putting him down there, and they would probably go into their work. Might give him some food or some water to drink so he'd be comfortable. Whatever they're doing acts of kindness for him, helping him. And who, seeing Jesus, Peter, and John about to go into the temple, asked to receive alms. And Peter, fastening his eyes upon him with John, said, "Look on us." He gave heed unto them, expecting to receive something from them. So he's looking at them. So he looks at them. He looks up at them. And Peter said, "Silver and gold have I none, but what I have, that give I thee. In the name of Jesus of Christ of Nazareth, walk." He took him by the right hand and raised him up. And immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. Now that was a miracle. His feet and ankle bones were not strong. If he had been born with this situation, let's go back. He was lame from his mother's womb. He was born that way, see, lame. He hadn't been using his muscles. They had atrophied. So his feet and ankle bones were received strength. I think his ankle bones, by implication, they may have been misshaped some way so that he couldn't walk when he's born. So there's some probably deformed in some way. And so he couldn't walk. So he didn't use them, so they atrophied, and so they were weak and probably just not very big because they hadn't been exercised. So what does he do? He's leaping, and he's up, he stood and began to walk, and entered them into the temple, walking and leaping and praising God. Now wait a second. Here's a man that his feet can't even support him. Now he's given the power, and his feet are healed, his ankle bones are healed, his muscles are healed, so that he can walk now. But wait a second. If you just heal the bones and just heal the muscles, that doesn't necessarily mean you can walk. You got to learn to walk. He'd been born lame. Verse 2. From this text, we learned two things. First, he never learned to walk because he's born lame. Second, his leg muscles had no doubt not developed because they were not exercised. So from these two facts, we deduce that Peter performed at least two miracles. First, he performed a miracle of giving his feet and ankle bones strength. Lameness was possible in having deformed feet and ankles. We don't know that for sure, but that's in verse 7, chapter 3. Second, Peter performed a miracle giving him the ability to walk. Normally, one has to learn to walk, Acts 3:8. When we walk, we just allow ourselves to fall forward, move our feet to catch ourselves. Walking is learned by this process. If you had little children, little babies, you watch them learn to walk, they fall. They'll fall and hit things. So they'll get up and try to walk. But again, they're falling forward and they have to put their feet out, catch themselves. You have to learn to walk. I watched my three children learn to walk, and other children learn to walk. And they have to learn to do it. And it's a learned process. But this man jumped right up, started running, leaping, and jumping around. And if he hadn't learned to walk, he didn't have to learn to walk because God gave him the ability to immediately begin walking. without having to learn it. That shows that there was at least 2 miracles and maybe more miracles performed. I see 2 miracles performed here. If the man was born lame, then he'd never walked. He'd never walked, then his muscles were both atrophied and he did not know how to walk. If his muscles were both atrophied and did not know how to walk, then he needed the muscles to be strengthened. He needed to know how to walk to be totally healed. He needed the muscles to be strengthened and perhaps the bones to be straightened out. He needed to know how to walk to be totally healed. And Peter both strengthened his muscles, gave him knowledge of how to walk. So the miracle was twofold at least. I concluded Peter both strengthened his muscles. Peter did it. I know the Holy Spirit was doing it. But the Apostle Peter was God's agent through which that was accomplished. So Peter, by the power of the Holy Spirit, performed 2 miracles. Are there questions? I think we see the same thing occurring over in that when Jesus healed and the man saw it as appears to be trees. I don't think Jesus' miracle was a weak miracle. It was just 2 miracles. Our 4th example now, we learned that both Samuel and Elijah, I believe, were priests. We can prove that. And we're going to make this argument, a series of arguments here. Only those of the tribe of Levi, the law of Moses, could be priests. And I'll give 2 verses and we'll cite some other scriptures. Aaron's sons were to be priests, Leviticus 1:8, 1:11, 2:2, 3:2, 12, 13:2, and 21:1, Numbers 3:3, Numbers 10:8, and so forth. Also, I developed this in Appendix O when I deal with Nadab and Abihu. And the sons of Aaron, the priest, put fire upon the altar, shall put fire upon the altar, and lay wood in order upon the fire. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall lay the pieces, the head and the fat in order upon the wood, as on the fire as upon the altar. So the sons of Aaron shall be priests. They were priests. Only priests could perform certain things. Like First Kings, King Uzziah was punished for trying to burn incense because it was limited to the priest. And we showed from other passages, we could show that only the priests could offer these sacrifices. Right? In 2 Chronicles 26:16-19, Uzziah wound up with leprosy because he presumed to take that role. Look at Uzziah, King Uzziah. But when he was strong, his heart was lifted up. That's Uzziah. So that he did corrupt it. Now he had another name, so we won't worry about that. And he trespassed against Jehovah his God, for when in the temple of Jehovah to burn incense upon the altar of incense to perform the role of a priest. Right? And Azariah, the priest, went up in after him, and with him 80 priests of Jehovah that were valiant men. They weren't afraid of the king. They were going to do what God said first, even if they lost their life for it. So they're valiant men. And they withstood Uzziah the king and said to him, he pretended not unto the Uzziah to burn incense unto Jehovah, but to the priests, sons of Aaron, that are consecrated to burn incense. Go out of the sanctuary, for thou hast trespassed, neither shall it be to thine honor from Jehovah God. It's not going to be good news for you, what's going to happen to you. And Uzziah was wroth, and I see just bitter rage. He had a censer in his hand to burn incense, and when he was wroth with the priest, the leprosy broke forth on his forehead before the priest in the house of Jehovah, beside the altar of incense. And he was ushered out, and he remained a leper the rest of his life. All right? So now he's punished with leprosy for presuming to do what the priest was assigned to do, and only the priests were assigned to do this. Get this by implication, the principle of exclusion. Right? Even Jesus could not be a priest under the law of Moses. And that's Hebrews 7:11-14. We dealt with this in Appendix O as well. Now, if there was perfection to the Levitical priesthood, or under it the people that received the law, that's the priesthood under the law of Moses, see. For what further need was there that another priest should arise after the order of Melchizedek and not be reckoned after the order of Aaron? So the prophecy was that the priest, Jesus, would be a priest after the order of Melchizedek. If perfection came to the Levitical priesthood, you wouldn't need to replace it. So it didn't have perfection. And we can see some of the reasons it was changed. Well, not one that book of Hebrews goes into it. For the priesthood being changed, there is made of necessity a change also of the law. For he of whom these things are said belonged to another tribe. He of whom these things are said is Jesus. Belonged to another tribe of which no man is given attendance at the altar. Nobody's given attendance at the altar of the tribe that Jesus was from. For it is evident that our Lord, so he's talking about our Lord Jesus, has sprung out of Judah, the tribe of Judah. As to which tribe Moses spake nothing concerning priests. So they can't be priests because it was specifically given to the tribe of Levi, and specifically even a subdivision of that tribe. That would be the descendants of Aaron. We've already seen that. That priesthood was limited to the tribe of Levi, and specifically a subdivision of the tribe, the descendants of Aaron. King Saul lost his throne because he presumed to offer sacrifices. 1 Samuel 13:8, we see this. And he tarried 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed, but Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. And Saul said, bring hither the burnt offerings to me and the peace offerings, and he offered the burnt offerings. So Saul made the offerings. And it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offerings, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him. And Samuel said, what hast thou done? What have you done? Saul said, because I saw that people were scattered from me, and that thou camest not within the days appointed. But that's not true. He would come at the end of the day, but it was still that day. And the Philistines assembled themselves together at Michmash. Therefore said I, now, well, the Philistines come down upon me in Gilgal, to Gilgal, by the treaty of the favor of the Lord. I forced myself, therefore, and offered the burnt offerings. I forced myself to do it. Okay. And Samuel said unto Saul, thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of Jehovah thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would Jehovah have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. But you just disobeyed God. You didn't wait until I came, and you presumed to be able to offer sacrifice, and that's limited to the priest. But now thy kingdom shall not continue. Jehovah hath sought him a man after his own heart, and Jehovah hath appointed him to be prince over his people, because thou hast not kept that which Jehovah commanded thee. So now wait a second. He offered sacrifice, and he sinned. He offered sacrifice. Samuel was the one that's supposed to offer sacrifices. What does it mean? Only the priest could offer sacrifices. For Samuel 10:8, now shalt go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I will come down unto thee and offer burnt offerings. And the sacrifice of peace offerings, 7 days shalt thou tarry, till I come unto thee and show thee what thou shalt do. That's instructions. I'm going to come down and offer that. And you have to wait on me. Since only priests, descendants of Aaron, could offer sacrifices, Samuel had to be a priest. God, who is righteous, would not punish Saul for offering a sacrifice because he's the wrong tribe, Benjamin, and allow Samuel to violate the same law. Get by with it. He just is not that kind of God. So he didn't allow Samuel to do something that he punished Saul for doing. So Samuel must have been a priest. And the only rational conclusion is Samuel was the tribe of Levi and the descendant of Aaron, a priest. We could add more evidence. Samuel worked with the high priest Eli in the tabernacle, and only priests could do that. So by implication, we draw the conclusion that Samuel was a priest. Any questions or comments? I think it's an inescapable conclusion. What about Elijah? What tribe was he from? Well, let's look. Kings 18:30 through 39. He offered sacrifices. We won't go and read that. You can read it for yourself. Since only priests descended of Aaron could offer sacrifices, Elijah was a priest. God, being just or righteous, would not punish Saul for offering sacrifice because of the wrong tribe, Benjamin. Allow Elijah to violate the same law. He wouldn't do that. The only rational conclusion is Elijah was of the tribe of Levi and a descendant of Aaron, the priest. Any questions or comments? Here's my logical argument about Samuel and Elijah. If only priests, descendants of Aaron, could offer sacrifice, and both Samuel and Elijah offered sacrifices, then both Samuel and Elijah were priests, descendants of Aaron. That's the conclusion we draw. Only priests, descendants of Aaron, could offer sacrifice. Both Aaron and Elijah offered sacrifices, and we might add here, and God accepted them without punishing them. Then we conclude that both Samuel and Elijah were priests, descendants of Aaron. A pretty rational conclusion. All right. Now, indirect proofs. Another way of proving a proposition is by indirect proofs. And so what we do is we assume temporarily that the desired conclusion is not true. Make an assumption is not true. So we write a contradictory statement. A statement that's a contradiction to what we're trying to prove. So if we prove that contradiction is not true, then we've proven the other. So if we assume that it's an A-type proposition we're trying to prove, we assume the O-type proposition is true and then show that it's not true. We show that the contradictory statement, the O-type, is not true. We've proven the A-type. Because if one's false, the other one has to be true because they're contradictories. And so that's one of the ways you do an indirect proof. Assume temporarily, and this is right out of a book, Jurgensen. Assume temporarily the conclusion is not true. Reason logic that it reads contradiction of the known fact. Point out that the temporary assumption must be false. You've assumed that it's not true. The contradictory statement, that is, you've made the assumption that the contradictory statement is true, say. And then you disprove the contradictory statement, and that proves your premise. So if you want to prove a negative E-type proposition is true, then you would show that the I-type proposition that corresponds with it would be false. Because of the contradictory. If one's false, the other is true. That's what he's saying here in simple terms. So, see that proving a statement by proving it's contrapositive is related to indirect proof. If you want to prove a statement, if P then Q, then you prove the contrapositive, if not Q, then not P. Or you can write an indirect proof assuming that Q is false and show this assumption implies that P is false. Okay. That makes sense? This is reductio ad absurdum. That's a form of indirect proof. Are there questions? We're going to stop right after 14, and we will go into that next week. Do you have any questions?